Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Elara Hayes woke before dawn, though morning felt like a whisper of promises hanging just beyond her bedroom window. In the spare room of her mother's century-old craftsman cottage on Evergreen Street, dawn arrived as pale mauve streaks across the Cascade foothills, stirring the world gently to life. She slipped free of her down comforter with practiced care, so as not to disturb the quiet hush of the house. Drawing in a deep breath of cedar and chamomile, the mingled scents that clung to the cottage's woven rugs and soft linen curtains, Elara felt the familiar tug of anticipation coil in her chest. Today she would step beyond a threshold she had long delayed crossing. Her feet found the well-worn path down a narrow hallway, where framed photographs hung in measured rows. Elara as a toddler in her father's arms, games of backyard tag, graduation caps airborne, and the solitary image of Galen Hayes, her father, in uniform, eyes serious, yet alight with purpose. That photograph was her mother Rosalind's anchor to a past brimming with hope and heartbreak. Elara paused before it, fingertips grazing the antique oak frame. "Good morning, Dad," she whispered, as though the portrait might answer. Then she crossed into the bathroom. The mirror reflected a woman in her late 20s who had seen more pain than most twice her age. High cheekbones and warm hazel eyes were offset by faint shadows beneath them, a testament to long hospital shifts and nights spent replaying patient stories in her mind. Elara pulled her dark hair into a loose bun, careful to leave a few strands free. She ran a fingertip along a small scar on her wrist, an old memento from nursing school. When she bandaged her own mishap after a distracted suture lesson, a faint smile curved her lips. She had given so much of herself to others that she had earned every scratch and line. The ritual unfolded. Soft cotton scrubs slipped on, fuzzy slippers replaced by sturdy work shoes, and the glint of her well-worn silver nurse's watch settled across her wrist. She tucked her name badge, E. Hayes RN, into the chest pocket and slid a leather notebook beside it, its pages brimming with patient notes and scribbled dreams. Elara paused at the door and caught the gentle hum of the radiator, the distant hoot of an owl bidding farewell to the night, and beyond it all, the first low rumble of her well-oiled station wagon warming in the driveway. All were comforting signals that life was stirring. Downstairs, the kitchen lantern glowed with sleepy warmth. Elara set the kettle on the gas stove and measured coffee grounds into a French press. She leaned against the counter, toes curling on the cool tile. Through the small window over the sink, she watched a single maple leaf drift lazily to the lawn, another reminder that, like the seasons, life changed whether she was ready or not. She poured boiling water over the grounds, inhaled the rich aroma, and let thoughts drift to the night to come. Emergencies, triumphs, sometimes tragedies, these were the moments she lived for. Yet they also made her long for something steadier, more permanent than the hospital's ever-turning carousel. Meanwhile, across town behind the dignified brick pillars of Maple Ridge Academy, Rosalind Hayes sat at a stained oak desk immersed in lesson plans. At 55, her posture was as upright as the rows of chalk-lined desks in her former kindergarten classroom. Silver-streaked auburn hair was pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, but in the lamplight a few strands glimmered like strands of moonlight grazing dark water. She tapped a pencil against her lesson outline for a homestead history unit, pausing to recall the precise dates of Oregon's settlement and the names of early pioneer families. Beyond that meticulous planning lay a deeper mission, ensuring her daughter followed the proper path Rosalind had charted when Elara was still a child. Rosalind rose and crossed to the mantelpiece, where that sepia photograph of Galen still held court. He had been a local hero, a soldier whose letters home spoke of duty, honor, and a future he intended to build with Rosalind after his tour. But war's harsh decree intervened, and Galen fell in a desert skirmish just months before his homecoming. Rosalind's young heart shattered, and with it, her vision of a carefree future. She had thrown herself into teaching, community events, and raising Elara alone. And in her quiet hours she wove for her daughter a tapestry of security. No more lost loves. No more unpredictable fates. Only carefully arranged facts and figures on lesson plans, and a promise of stability sealed with each parent-teacher conference. Maple Ridge itself seemed to close around them with benevolent precision, streets lined with maples ablaze in autumn hues. Cozy cafes with chalkboard menus offering single-origin brews and house-baked scones. Local shops adorned with bunting for every holiday. But beneath its picture-perfect veneer,
Tradition weit her Willi.
No whisper of scandal, no deviation from the well-worn path of marriage, children, and community standing was tolerated. Rosalind had internalized this code long ago, and she believed wholeheartedly that Julian Blackwood, tall, athletic, and groomed for leadership, was precisely the companion her daughter should choose. Outside, Elara's French press click-clacked as it plunged, and she poured herself a dark mug of coffee. She wrapped both hands around its warmth and closed her eyes, savoring the moment. Soon she would drive to Maple Ridge General, bracing for another long shift. In a few hours, she would return to this same kitchen for dinner, where Mother would be waiting in a dress crisp enough to greet royalty, prepared to offer congratulations to Julian, not Dorian. Elara set her jaw. No matter how many pages her mother devoted to lesson plans, no matter how many expectations lined the mantelpiece, Elara intended to speak her truth tonight and let the maple-scented winds carry her promise of love with Dorian Wells into a future she chose for herself. She finished her coffee in 3 measured gulps, grabbed her tote bag, and headed for the door. The roar of the station wagon greeted her. Tomorrow's sun would rise with new possibilities. Tonight, in the lingering hush of dawn, she claimed her courage. As she locked the cottage behind her and slipped into the driver's seat, Elara Hayes felt the soft click of fate's latch, and with one decisive turn of the key, she set her world in motion. Elara stepped into the warm glow of her mother's dining room just as the clock chimed 6. The long wooden table, scuffed from decades of holiday feasts, was already set with mismatched china. Delicate rose-patterned plates inherited from her grandmother, heavy stoneware bowls Rosalind preferred. A single amber lamp cast soft pools of light over the polished surface, illuminating a pan of rosemary roasted chicken and bowls of creamy mashed potatoes. Steam curled in lazy spirals, perfuming the air with homey reassurance. Across from Elara sat Rosalind Hayes, poised and immaculate in a tailored navy dress, her auburn hair pulled back into a sleek chignon. To her left, Thaddeus, Rosalind's younger brother, smiled encouragingly, spoon halfway to his mouth. He had always been Elara's quiet ally, the one family member who dared to challenge Rosalind's ironclad plans. Beside him, their neighbor Mrs. Whitlock, a sprightly widow and longtime family friend, dabbed at her lips with a lace napkin. It was as though half the town had gathered to witness what was supposed to be a celebratory announcement. Elara's heart hammered as she slid into her seat at the head of the table. She caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished surface, hazel eyes bright with quiet determination, shoulders squared against the weight of expectation. Every fiber of her being told her the moment of truth had come. Rosalind cleared her throat. "Darling, I'm so pleased we could all share this meal, especially now that Julian and I have finally settled the date for your wedding." She smiled, perfectly primed. "It will be early spring, at St. Aurelia's. I've already begun planning the guest list." There it was, the topic Rosalind had rehearsed for months. Elara's stomach churned. Spring weddings, floral centerpieces, live string quartets, Rosalind's fantasy for her daughter. But this wasn't her dream. Elara inhaled slowly, lifted her chin. "Mom," she began, her voice calm but steely. "Thank you for arranging such a lovely dinner. But I need to tell you something important." Fork paused midair. She set it down gently. "I'm not marrying Julian." A pin could have dropped. Thaddeus blinked in surprise. Mrs. Whitlock's napkin fell to the floor. Across the table, Rosalind's eyes went cold, disbelief flickering like an unpaid candle. "Well," Rosalind said, voice taut. "You must be speaking rashly. Surely you mean you need more time to consider." "You can't. This is not a whim," Elara interrupted. She folded her hands, meeting her mother's unwavering glare. "I love someone else. His name is Dorian Wells. He's been my partner for over a year, and last night he asked me to marry him." A tremor ran through the guests. Thaddeus's spoon clinked against china. Mrs. Whitlock let out a small gasp. Rosalind closed her eyes briefly, then opened them, emerald shards of anger and hurt. "Dorian Wells?" she repeated as though the name tasted wrong. "The civil engineer from out east? He's not our kind of match, Elara." Elara drew in another breath. "He's smart, caring, and we share a life built on trust. Dorian saved my stability long before he ever asked for my hand." Her words grew stronger. "I know what you hoped for me, Mom, but I need you to know this is my choice." The room felt suddenly too small. Steam rose from plates that now seemed absurdly cheerful. Roasted carrots glowed like embers. Rolls gleamed under lamplight. But Elara could see only her mother's face, pale, drawn, a mother who believed she was doing right by her daughter, now confronted with raw defiance. A flicker of sorrow crossed Rosalind's features. She set down her fork. "Elara, she paused, searching for the words that had felt so certain in her mind just hours before. "I promised your father," her voice cracked. "I promised him I would keep you safe, that I would see you settled in a secure match. Julian's family, they have roots here. Their support ensures your future in this community." Elara's throat tightened. "Dad would have wanted me happy, Mom. He wouldn't have forced me into something I didn't believe in." She leaned forward, voice softening. "Please understand, Dorian isn't a stranger. He's from a farming town, yes, but he built his own career at Cascade Engineering. He's honest, loyal. Exactly the partner I need." Silence ensued. Rosalind's eyes glistened as she weighed the confession, the simmering emotions in a daughter she adored but could not control. Thaddeus took Elara's hand under the table, offering solidarity. Mrs. Whitlock dabbed at tears, clearly moved by Elara's bravery. Finally, Rosalind closed her eyes again and exhaled. "I see the determination in you now that I saw in your father." "Very well." Her voice trembled, vulnerable for the first time that evening. "If this is truly your choice, if you believe in him so deeply," she swallowed, fought her pride, "then tell me about him. I want to know why he's worthy of you." Relief washed through Elara like dawn breaking over the foothills. She met her mother's gaze, nodded, and began to share Dorian's story. How he had patched a roof for a single mother in Harlow Valley, how he volunteered to rebuild a playground after storms, how his laugh warmed the chillest days. As she spoke, steam from her coffee wreathed around her words, and the table leaned in as though hungry for truth. In that fragile moment, between expectation and acceptance, mother and daughter took the first, tentative steps toward a future neither had foreseen, but one they might build together. And so, in the amber glow of Maple Ridge's evening, Elara's announcement rippled through the family, shifting loyalties, forging new understanding, and setting the stage for a story defined not by plans laid long ago, but by the courage to follow one's own heart. Elara's heart pounded as the last vestiges of dinner chatter died on the hinges of her parents' dining room door. She had expected resistance, but the cold flicker in Rosalind's eyes went beyond mere disappointment. It was a chasm, an unspoken, "How dare you," stretching between them. The china lay half-forgotten, steam still curling from empty plates, yet it felt absurdly trivial now. This was no longer a family dinner, it was a battleground of loyalties. Rosalind rose, palms flat against the wooden table. "Elara, sit down," she commanded, voice low but steely. "We have work to do." Elara met her mother's gaze without flinching. In that moment, she refused to shrink. She stood as well, smoothing the fabric of her scrub top, the memory of Dorian's warm hand in hers lending courage. I will not sit down until you hear me, she replied, steady. You need to understand why I'm doing this. Rosalind's face paled. She drew in a sharp breath, as if grappling with a storm of emotions. You're rebuffing every plan I've carefully arranged since you were a child, she said, tone clipped. I've spent years ensuring you would have every advantage. You cannot simply toss it aside for a whim. A whim? Elara's laughter was brittle. Dorian is not a whim. He's the man who showed me what partnership means. He's the man who waited for me while I finished nursing school, who held my hand through late-night emergencies and cheered me on when I earned my first promotion. Her words tumbled out, urgent. He values me. I've spent too long questioning myself. Am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? With him, I know. Rosalind's jaw hardened. Your father was a soldier. He believed in duty above all else. He would never have counted on knowing someone as your sole justification. He would have honored the community, the traditions that bind us. She glanced at Thaddeus, who shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His presence alone felt like a rebellion in Rosalind's meticulously ordered world. Elara stepped closer, lowering her voice. Dad believed in honor, yes, but he also believed in love. You told me that yourself after he died. She paused, studying her mother's face. You told me that love can be its own greatest security. Then why is it different for me? Rosalind's eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, as if unwilling to let tears slip. It is different for you, she snapped, voice quavering. Because I am protecting you from a future of regrets. People resent mismatches. They judge. They talk. If you marry someone without family standing, no matter how kind he is, you'll be the wife who could have done better.
Do you understand the weight of that?
Elara's throat tightened. You think I haven't felt judgment? She whispered fiercely. You think I built my career without earning respect? I spent years proving myself, late nights, emotional toll, saved lives. If people in Maple Ridge judge me, that's on them. But I refuse to let fear dictate whom I marry. Rosalind took a trembling breath. Fear? You call what I feel fear? I call it responsibility. Responsibility to preserve your reputation, your safety, your place in this town. She held her arms wide, as though embracing the entire community. Julian's family has resources and connections. They donate to Maple Ridge Academy. They can ensure your children get into the best schools. They can buy my life. Elara cut in sharply. You can't buy love, Mom. And I will not be a charity case. Her voice softened. Look at me. When I wear my scrubs, I save people's lives, no strings attached. When Dorian and I walk into a room, nobody wonders if I deserve him. They see two people who chose each other. Rosalind's lips quivered. She looked away, as though seeking an escape. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking clock on the wall and the distant drip of an outside faucet. Thaddeus cleared his throat, but neither mother nor daughter glanced at him. Finally, Rosalind spoke, voice hollow. When your father died, I vowed to spare you every heartbreak. That's all I've ever done. Protected you. She turned to Elara, eyes haunted by decades of grief. I never wanted you to feel lost, the way I felt when I lost him. Elara's anger dissolved into empathy. She stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Rosalind's arm. I know you did, Mom. I know you love me more than anything. But protecting me by choking off my happiness, that isn't the same as love. Her voice trembled. You gave me everything except the freedom to choose my own path. And tonight I need that freedom. Rosalind's shoulders slumped, the tension leaving her frame. She closed her eyes, as though summoning strength. If I let you go this way into something I don't understand, will you at least promise to be careful? Promise me that this choice comes from a place of love, not rebellion. Elara smiled through tears. I promise, Mom. I love him because he loves me. And he will care for you, too. You'll see. Rosalind nodded slowly, the first faint warmth of acceptance tugging at her stern exterior. She exhaled, as though releasing a decade's worth of rigid expectations. "Then go tell your father," she whispered. "Because from this moment on, I stand beside you." Elara folded her arms around her mother, bridging the chasm with a single embrace. In that moment, two wills collided and surrendered, forging a bond bound not by obligation or tradition, but by mutual respect and understanding. As they stood together in the quiet aftermath of the storm, the distant lights of Maple Ridge Academy glowed through the window, symbols of both heritage and change. And in the hushed echo of their reconciliation, Elara and Rosalind Hayes took their first tentative steps toward a future that neither had scripted, but both would courageously shape. Rosalind Hayes sat alone in her study long after the dinner's aftermath had settled into quiet understanding. The amber glow of a single banker's lamp illuminated the room's high shelves. Sagging under the weight of leather-bound ledgers, children's storybooks, and framed photographs that chronicled decades of Maple Ridge history and her own life. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, fingers brushing the spine of a worn journal nestled between volumes of Emily Dickinson. Her breath faltered at the memory the journal held. The day Galen Hayes, her first love and husband, had enlisted for what he called one last tour. She rose stiffly and crossed to the mantel, drawing the sepia photograph of him into her hands. His strong jaw, dark hair, and clear eyes staring into nothingness spoke of hope and promise. She remembered how he knelt before her in the glow of a hospital corridor, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing the urgency of war, and asked, with a solemn joy, if she would wait for him. She had been 22 then, his uniform crisp, her heart wild with youthful certainty. "Rosalind Nguyen," he had said, using her maiden name in a playful salute. "Marry me now, before this world finds reason to keep us apart." And she had said yes, her tears of farewell mingling with his laughter as he pressed a quick kiss to her temple. Back then, she believed love could conquer distance, time, even danger. Their wedding had been a modest affair at St. Aurelia's, a flurry of white lace and promise. She had tucked Galen's letters close to her heart, the ink smudged by dust and sweat, as she taught kindergarten by day and waited by night for news that never came. When the telegram arrived in early spring, the war had changed its final deadline. The note, concise and detached, informed her that Galen had fallen in the line of duty, April 14, 1992. Her world fractured in half. The left side, devoted to teaching children their letters, no longer made sense. The right side, once filled with laughter and long walks through pine forests, lay barren. In that cruel instant, Rosalind's future shattered. She returned to Maple Ridge Academy not as the bright-eyed bride she had been, but as a widow at 23, clutching a photograph and a grief too heavy for words. In the years that followed, she threw herself into her students' lives, shaping young minds with strict kindness. She never remarried. Instead, she loved through her work, every lesson plan, every PDA meeting, every holiday recital a testament to the life she believed Galen would have built. When Elara was born that autumn, Rosalind felt a flicker of hope reignite. She fed her daughter on her own steady love, taught her to read before kindergarten, and planted maple saplings in the front yard so Elara could climb them when she grew older. But beneath each proud smile lay a silent vow, to shield her child from the heartbreak that had scarred Rosalind's soul. Over the years, Sunday dinners had become Rosalind's ritual, each plate placed on that long wooden table representing another layer of protection. She had a list, unwritten but as real as the tide, of suitable suitors for Elara. Julian Blackwood, with his prestigious family, topped that list. He was poised to inherit the Academy's endowment board, his pedigree as unassailable as a fortress. If Rosalind could marry her daughter into the Blackwood legacy, perhaps she could finally secure the safety and social standing she had lost. Yet last night's announcement upended her careful design. The truth Elara spoke, of Dorian Wells, whose roots lay in farmlands and whose heart lay firmly beside hers, felt like a betrayal of Galen's memory. If Galen had never returned, how could Rosalind trust in a love that beckoned her daughter away from the only anchor she had built in this world? That morning, before Elara stirred from her room upstairs, Rosalind brewed herself a pot of chamomile, her own mother's remedy against restless nights. She poured 2 cups, set one aside, and carried the other to the window seat overlooking the back garden. The sky was pale, the maples bare except for a few stubborn russet leaves. She wrapped her shawl tighter and stared at the saplings she had planted 40 years ago. Their branches gnarled with time, but still reaching for the sky. The door creaked. Elara appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. For a moment mother and daughter regarded each other in silence, the daughter seeking reassurance, the mother grappling with her fractured past. "Mom," Elara ventured softly. "Are you okay?" Rosalind managed a small nod. "Just remembering." She set her teacup aside. "Your father used to bring me tea in the mornings, once he returned from patrol. He'd say the world was waking up with possibilities. I used to believe him." Tears pricked Elara's eyes. "I know you did, but he would have understood what love means, not just duty." Rosalind's lips quivered. "I asked him once, would you let me choose another path if it meant my happiness? He looked at me with those steady eyes and said, 'Rosalind, find your own happiness, and teach your children to find theirs.' I held on to that promise when he was gone, and I thought I was keeping it until last night." Elara knelt beside her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind Rosalind's ear. "You did keep it. You gave me the strength to stand up to you. That's exactly the courage Dad would have wanted me to have." Rosalind lowered her gaze to her mother's heirloom teacup. The chamomile had gone cold. She traced the gold filigree at the rim, a pattern her grandmother had collected from travels in Europe. Heritage coursed through her veins, the Nguyen family's resilience, the Hayes family's service, Maple Ridge's steadfast community. Yet she realized now that resilience demanded more than protection. It demanded trust and release. Across the room, the journal lay open on a side table, entries she had written in the weeks after Galen's death. Pages of grief, guilt, dreams deferred. She closed it gently, as if laying a hand on her own heart. Then, slowly, she rose and retrieved the sepia photograph again. Bringing it to her chest, she inhaled deeply and steadied herself. "I almost lost sight of the promise I made, to find my happiness and help you find yours," Rosalind murmured. She brushed her fingers across Galen's image. "I'm telling you now, Elara. Go after him. Go after your happiness with Dorian Wells. Build your life. I will stand beside you." Elara's relief shone in her embrace. Rosalind held her tightly, as if gathering every ounce of courage she could muster. Behind them, the maples swayed in a chill breeze, their bare limbs sleek against the gray sky, a reminder that even in deepest winter, life surges toward renewal. In the hush of that early morning, as mother and daughter shared a moment of fragile reconciliation, Maple Ridge itself seemed to breathe in anticipation. The saplings stood ready to witness their stories of love lost, of love reclaimed, and of the unbreakable promise that endures in memory and spirit. And as Rosalind guided her daughter down the garden path, 2 teacups left behind on the window seat, she took her first step beyond the shadow of yesterday, toward a future both had longed for but never dared to claim, together. Elara spent the week mentally rehearsing every moment of tonight's encounter. She woke early Saturday morning, layering her hair into loose waves and choosing a dress that struck balance between respectful and authentic, deep teal, with sleeves long enough to satisfy her mother's penchant for modesty, but cut in a way that felt distinctly Elara's. Her nurse's ID badge nestled safely in her purse. She departed Maple Ridge General an hour early to decorate the dining room with fresh flowers, white peonies Elara had cut from a late spring garden just down Evergreen Street, their sweet fragrance mingling with anticipation. In the kitchen, Rosalind moved with deliberate precision. She wore a tailored charcoal blazer over a crisp blouse, the uniform of a respected Maple Ridge Academy matriarch. On the stove, a rich mushroom risotto simmered, alongside pan-seared salmon glazed in honey and thyme. Bowls of asparagus and lemon-dressed arugula stood ready, and a bottle of 2018 Willamette Valley Pinot Noir chilled in a marble bucket. Every detail reflected Rosalind's commitment to excellence, each dish a calculated statement. This family knows how to host. Thaddeus Hayes, Rosalind's younger brother, hovered nearby, offering an occasional thumbs-up or a wry grin. Though he respected his sister's high standards, he sensed Elara's nerves and shot her encouraging glances. "Don't worry," he said, folding newspaper over a vase to protect the tablecloth. "Dorian's a gentleman. He'll shine." By 5:30, the plate settings gleamed under the chandelier's warm glow. Elara checked her reflection one last time in the foyer mirror, shoulders back, smile genuine, heart steady. She had waited for this. Dorian Wells, the man whose name she'd fought hard to utter aloud in her mother's dining room, would now stand as her chosen partner. A soft knock echoed through the hallway. Elara opened the door to find Dorian on the front step, suit jacket in hand, tie loosened just enough to reveal his friendly demeanor. At 29, he had the composed confidence of someone who built bridges, literally and figuratively, for a living. His dark hair caught the late afternoon light, and his earnest hazel eyes shone with warmth. In one hand, he carried a leather-bound journal, his own gift to Rosalind, reflecting her love of memories and measured reflections. "Ready?" Elara whispered, offering her arm. Dorian smiled and offered his elbow. "Ready." Inside, Rosalind greeted them both with a genteel smile, but her posture remained as rigid as the evening star. "Dorian, welcome," she said coolly, extending a slender hand. "I've heard much about you." Dorian bowed slightly and took her hand with respectful gentleness. "Thank you for having me, Mrs. Hayes. It's an honor to meet you." Rosalind's gaze flicked to his journal, then nodded. "I appreciate the thoughtfulness. Please have a seat." She motioned toward the chair at Elara's right, the place of honor traditionally reserved for the fiancé Rosalind had first envisioned. Thaddeus slid into the seat opposite, offering Dorian a warm smile that broke some of the tension. "Glad you could make it," he said. "I'd hate to have all this risotto go to waste." Dorian chuckled softly, settling in and placing the journal on his lap. "I'm very much looking forward to it." Rosalind returned to her place at the head of the table and signaled Elara to sit. "Shall we begin?" she asked. Unmoving, Elara offered Dorian a supportive smile as she took her seat. The meal commenced in polite formality. Rosalind carved the salmon with expert precision, passing slices to Dorian first. He tasted it thoughtfully, then looked up. "Delicious," he said warmly. "The balance of sweet and savory is impeccable." The first crack of approval surfaced on Rosalind's face, brief, yet meaningful. Elara relaxed fractionally. The conversation turned to Dorian's work, the innovative bridge he had overseen in Harlow Valley, the sustainability features he championed, and the apprenticeship program he ran for high school seniors considering engineering careers. Julian's family connections, yet to be publicly dissolved, loomed silently in the background. But Dorian's earnest passion rendered the subject moot. Rosalind's eyes narrowed slightly as she absorbed every detail. "So you mentor students?" she inquired. "That's admirable." Dorian nodded. "I believe in that generation. They'll inherit these mountains one day. They deserve guidance and real-world experience." Rosalind turned her gaze to Elara, as if assessing her daughter's judgment. Elara took a breath. "Mom, Dorian's mentorship is one reason I admire him. He cares about community and the next generation." Rosalind's lips curved in a faint, imperceptible thaw. The asparagus arrived, crisp and green. They all helped themselves to the bright stalks, and the conversation shifted to Maple Ridge itself, its community theater, the volunteer fire department fundraiser, and the upcoming summer music festival. Dorian expressed a desire to participate, offering to design a temporary pedestrian bridge over the Sanium River so attendees could cross safely during peak hours. "An impressive suggestion," Rosalind said, sipping her wine thoughtfully. "I'll make sure the festival committee hears it." As the risotto course arrived, creamy arborio rice with wild mushrooms and parmesan, Thaddeus leaned over to Elara, whispering, "You see? He's charming." Elara dipped her spoon, listening to Dorian share a humorous anecdote about fixing a failed welding seam on a bridge just hours before its grand opening. Laughter rippled around the table. Rosalind allowed herself a genuine smile at his story, nodding with evident amusement. By dessert, vanilla bean panna cotta with drizzled lavender syrup, Rosalind's demeanor had softened considerably. She leaned forward, placing her wine glass on the table with deliberate care. Dorian, I want to thank you for coming tonight and sharing your life with us. I admit I had reservations, but your integrity and dedication to our town speak volumes. Elara is fortunate to have you as a partner. Elara's chest tightened with relief and pride. Dorian turned to Rosalind, his expression earnest. Mrs. Hayes, hearing that means everything to me. Elara is my greatest inspiration. I want to support her in every way. Rosalind's gaze shifted from Dorian to her daughter and back again. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then opened them, vulnerability shining through. Perhaps I judged too hastily. She reached across and placed a hand atop Elara's. Elara, thank you for having the courage to introduce us. Elara's eyes brimmed with unshed tears as she grasped her mother's hand. In that moment, the carefully arranged table, the polished silverware, and the meticulously planned menu faded into insignificance. What mattered was the recognition dawning in Rosalind's eyes, the understanding that Elara's happiness was worth disrupting tradition. Dorian rose and offered his hand to Rosalind. Thank you, truly. I look forward to many more dinners like this. Rosalind accepted his hand, her grip steady now. So do I, she said softly. As the evening drew to a close, the household lingered over coffee and soft conversation. Dorian and Elara stepped onto the porch together, breathing in the cool night air. Rosalind watched them from the doorway, a small, contented smile on her lips. Thaddeus followed, closing the door behind them to let the family share this quiet, triumphant moment. Under the silver spill of the street lamp, Elara leaned into Dorian's arm. Thank you, she murmured. Dorian kissed her temple. Thank you for trusting me. And inside the cottage, Rosalind Hayes allowed herself to hope that love, true, chosen love, could indeed be the greatest legacy of all. 2 nights later, Dorian found himself standing beneath the awning of Bella's Bistro, a cozy brick building tucked between the town's historic library and a flower shop. The string lights overhead cast a gentle glow on the cobblestone walkway, and the scent of rosemary focaccia spilled onto the sidewalk. He pressed the doorbell beside the unmarked back entrance, a signal that tonight's meeting was anything but casual. Inside, the bistro's back room was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of glassware. A single candle flickered on the small round table, and Rosalind Hayes sat poised, her charcoal blazer draped over the chair beside her. The severity in her pale eyes contrasted sharply with the room's warm ambient light. Thank you for coming, she said, voice calm but edged with authority. She gestured to the seat across from her. Dorian slid in, the leather of the chair creaking softly. No problem, Mrs. Hayes, he replied, using the formal address despite the tension. You sounded urgent. Rosalind folded her hands on the table. I do, she said. I want to talk about your relationship with Elara. Her tone was measured, but Dorian sensed the steely undertow. He nodded, exhaling slowly. What's on your mind? She studied him for a moment before leaning forward. I've raised Elara to value integrity, discretion, and goodwill. Yet you've chosen to challenge every plan I've made for her future. She paused. I cannot have our family, nor the town, speculating about this. Dorian frowned. I respect your perspective, but Elara and I are in love. There's nothing to speculate. Love, Rosalind interrupted quietly, doesn't always translate well in the eyes of our community. People will talk. I have a duty to preserve my daughter's reputation. She tapped the edge of her wine glass. You hold sensitive information about her. Her meager savings in Cascade Credit Union, her tentative plans for a second loan on our family home. You know that. Dorian's chest tightened. Mrs. Hayes, I've never threatened her. No, but you could, Rosalind said softly. And if our partnership leads to financial instability, I cannot guarantee the goodwill of certain town leaders. You see, the Blackwoods contribute substantially to the Academy Endowment and to Maple Ridge's annual Clean Water Initiative. If our whispered rumors stir doubts, it could jeopardize everything Elara has worked for and everything I've built. Dorian's fingers curled around the journal in his lap. I have no interest in harming her or undermining her future. That's never been my intention. Rosalind's eyes narrowed. Intentions matter less than outcomes. If I permit this union, I will have to anticipate the worst. So I'm asking you directly, will you end your engagement with Elara? Will you walk away silently before these rumors take hold? He swallowed. You're asking me to break her heart to protect what, exactly? Your reputation? The town's image. She stiffened. To protect my daughter. If you step aside now, I can handle the conversation from there. I will tell her it was never meant to be, and she will return to a path of certainty with Julian. If you refuse, I cannot promise that these financial questions won't surface. You need to think of Elara's well-being. The words hit him like icy water. He recalled Elara's bright smile at dinner, her trusting gaze when he introduced her mother. Could he betray her now? Could he sacrifice the woman he loved because her mother wielded leverage over bank statements and local politics? He shook his head.
No.
I care too deeply for her. I refuse to use her finances or my family's goodwill as bargaining chips. Rosalind's expression hardened. She took a slow sip of her Pinot Noir, then placed the glass down with deliberate precision. Very well. She straightened her blazer. I warned you. Dorian rose from the chair. I won't be intimidated into abandoning her. He turned to leave, the candlelight stretched long beneath his shoulders. Rosalind called after him. Remember, Mr. Wells, white lies and half-truths spread faster than wildfire in Maple Ridge. If you truly love Elara, you'll reconsider. He paused at the door, hand on the handle. I love her, Mrs. Hayes, and I will stand by her. With that, he stepped out into the night, leaving her alone in the flickering candlelight. Across town, Elara paced her apartment's hardwood floors, phone clutched in her hand. Dorian's promise to meet here had been abrupt. He had seemed unsettled. When he finally arrived, hours later, he closed the door behind them and pressed her against him, forehead to forehead. I'm sorry, he whispered. She threatened to ruin you, your home, your name. His voice cracked. She asked me to call this off. Elara traced the lines of his worry-laden face. Did you? She asked, breathless. Dorian shook his head, determination flaring in his eyes. Never. Whatever comes, whispers, rumors, threats, I'll face it with you. Together. Tears glistened in Elara's eyes as she wrapped her arms around him. I love you, she murmured. And I love you, he answered, sealing their pact with a resolute kiss. In the shadows of Bella's bistro, mother and daughter's worlds had collided with Dorian's convictions, and the stakes only grew higher. As the clock ticked past midnight, a new resolve took root in Maple Ridge. Love would not yield to schemes, and hearts entwined would fight for their own future. Elara first sensed something was wrong when her phone buzzed insistently during her mid-afternoon break at Maple Ridge General. She wiped her hands on her scrub top and glanced at the screen. Dorian. A quick tap brought up a terse message. We need to talk. 7 p.m., Riverside Park. No explanation, no pleasantries, just a time, a place, and urgency that prickled her skin. Riverside Park lay a 10-minute drive along the winding banks of the Sandium River. When Elara arrived, the autumn air was crisp, and the fallen leaves underfoot created a rustling carpet of gold and scarlet. She spotted Dorian near the wrought iron gazebo where they had shared hot chocolate one winter evening. He faced the river, shoulders tense, hands thrust into the pockets of his charcoal coat. As she approached, he turned, eyes hollow. Elara, he said, voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry. His words tumbled out in a rush. I've been offered a 6-month rotation in Seattle. Pivotal project. I have to go. He paused, biting his lip. And I don't think I can come back. Her heart stuttered. What? He shook his head, avoiding her gaze. I thought I could balance it all, but my firm expects me to commit fully. They can't have me flying back every weekend. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Elara, but I can't marry you. A cold weight settled in her chest. You can't marry me, she echoed, stunned. We chose each other. You promised. I know. He cut in, anguish in his tone. I promised. But I've changed my mind. He pressed a hand against the railing. My priorities shifted. I met someone else. The words hit her like a blow. Someone else? She whispered, vision tunneling. He met her eyes then, shame burning on his cheeks. I'm sorry, he repeated. Her name is Veronica. She's on the Seattle team. We got close during site visits. I never meant for it, but it happened. Elara felt the gazebo tilt beneath her. The wind's whisper became a roar in her ears. She took a trembling step back. So, you're leaving me for her? Dorian's gaze dropped.
I'm sorry, Elara.
It just happened. A lump formed in her throat. She staggered away from him, knees threatening to buckle. The riverside path blurred beneath her feet. She found a bench and sat down, fighting for air. How could you? She choked out. After everything. After facing my mother's objections, leaving behind security. How could you do this? Dorian's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry, he whispered again. I never wanted to hurt you. Elara's tears came hot and unbidden. She clutched her chest, where hope had been beating only moments before. You betrayed me, she said, voice hollow. You betrayed us. He knelt before her on the damp grass. I know. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I had to tell you in person. She looked at him, eyes rimmed red. Why? She demanded. Why go back on your word? Why now? He swallowed. I thought I was doing the right thing, chasing my career. I saw how your mother cornered me, and I felt pressured to meet her standards. I'm weak, Elara. I'm weak. Her chest heaved. You were strong enough to plan a future with me. Then you were not strong enough to see it through. Dorian covered his face with his hands. I'm so sorry. Silence fell between them, broken only by the soft lap of river water against the bank. Elara felt the years of laughter, encouragement, and whispered promises crumble into shards at her feet. A long, ragged sob escaped her. Dorian rose slowly, guilt etched into every line of his posture. I should go, he said softly. He turned away, but Elara's voice, shaken and raw, stopped him. Don't leave like this. He paused, shoulders tense. I have to. I can't stay and watch you hate me. She swallowed back more tears. I don't hate you yet, she whispered. It's too soon. He turned to look at her, eyes haunted. I loved you, he said. I thought I could be the partner you deserve. But I realized I'm not the man you need. Her breath hitched. Don't say that. He nodded, stepping closer. It's true. She rose, legs unsteady, and faced him directly. You made your choice, she said, voice gathering strength. I won't stand in your way anymore. Dorian's expression cracked. He reached out tentatively, hand trembling.
Elara, I'm sorry.
She held up a hand to stop him. Go, she said, tears streaming. Go be with her. But don't come back. He exhaled, relief and sorrow mingling. Goodbye, Elara. As he stepped away and disappeared down the lantern-lit path, Elara felt her world shift into darkness. The bench beneath her seemed as cold and barren as her shattered heart. She sank onto it, head in her hands, sobs racking her body. The river's gentle lapping stood in stark contrast to the storm inside her. She had lost him, the man who once whispered, I'll stand by you, now was gone, replaced by a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound she had ever known. She stayed there long after the street lamps flickered off. The night pressed in, starless, and the distant hum of Maple Ridge life felt impossibly far away. In that void of grief, Elara Hayes understood the raw truth of broken trust, that love could be stolen, that promises could be broken, and that sometimes the greatest heartbreaks came not from outsiders, but from the ones you believed in most. When she finally rose, the first blade of dawn had begun to color the horizon. She wiped her cheeks, braced herself, because life in the hospital would resume, and she would resume her role, caring for others even as her own heart ached. But inside her, something had irrevocably changed. The chapters she had written with Dorian had ended, and now she would have to learn how to write the rest of her story on her own terms. Elara returned home in the gray light of early dawn, her heart still raw from the riverbank's betrayal. The scrub pockets at her waist felt strangely heavy, laden not with medical tools, but with shattered trust. She climbed the front steps of her mother's craftsman cottage and paused, dread coiling in her stomach. Inside, the windows glowed with the promise of breakfast, but also the inevitability of confrontation. Rosalind greeted her in the foyer, arms crossed over a silk scarf patterned with maple leaves. "You're up early," she observed, voice neutral. Elara tried to muster nonchalance. "I couldn't sleep," she lied. Rosalind regarded her with those keen, unwavering eyes. "We need to talk about your future, with or without Mr. Wells." She used his formal title as though sealing a business contract. "Come into the dining room." Elara swallowed and followed. The table was reset from the other night's dinner. Porcelain plates lined the polished oak, alongside flutes of freshly squeezed grapefruit juice. In the center, a vase of white tulips, Julian's mother's favorite, stood erect. Elara's chest tightened. Rosalind took her seat at the head. "I trust you understand why I insisted on Julian as your fiancé." She paused, finger tracing the tulip's petals. "His family's support ensures Maple Ridge Academy's scholarship fund, and his position guarantees stability for our family's legacy. Our standing here, your future, depends on it." Elara's hands tightened into fists beneath the table. "Mom, I appreciate everything you've done, but—" Rosalind cut her off. "But nothing," she said firmly. "Elara, you've been through enough uncertainty. Mr. Wells was kind, but clearly not suited to your ambitions." She pressed her lips together. "Julian, however, comes from a long line of community leaders. His grandfather founded our local hospital wing. His mother chairs the town council. Imagine the doors that marriage would open for you, and for our family." Elara closed her eyes against the pang in her chest. She pictured Julian, polished, confident, the safe choice. She recalled his bland condolences after Dorian's departure. "I'm here for you, Elara, if you need me." But the words had felt hollow, the embrace obligatory. "What about what I need?" she whispered. "You've arranged everything for me, but you've never asked what I truly want." Rosalind's gaze softened only momentarily. "You want security. I'm giving you security." Elara shook her head, disbelief simmering into frustration. She stood abruptly. "Security isn't enough. I need love. Mutual, passionate, unwavering. If Julian can't give me that, I'd rather face uncertainty than a loveless marriage." Rosalind's lips thinned. Her posture stiffened into that of a general marshalling her troops. "Are you threatening to reject Julian?" Elara's heart hammered. "I'm telling you the truth." Rosalind rose, glass of juice trembling in her hand. "You leave me no choice." Her voice was steady but cold. "If you refuse to accept Julian, you will be on your own, not just socially but financially. I've allocated my savings toward his education fund and our family trust on the assumption of your marriage. I can't reverse that without jeopardizing both our standings." Elara felt the floor tilt beneath her. Her mother's ultimatum was clear: embrace Julian or lose her patrimony and place in the community. Rosalind advanced, voice urgent. "Elara, listen to me. You're a talented nurse, yes, but in our town, reputation is everything. Stand alone, and you'll face gossip about why your fiancé walked away, about your refusal to marry well. Is that what you want?" Elara's breath grew shallow. The weight of expectation pressed in on all sides: her mother's carefully built alliances, the academy's future, Maple Ridge's tight-knit judgments. She envisioned the town square's white gazebo, whispered judgments swirling around her like autumn leaves. She felt small, vulnerable. But beneath that pressure, something stirred, a spark lit by years of saving lives, by battles fought on hospital floors, by surviving loss. She squared her shoulders. I won't marry Julian for convenience. I won't trade my heart for stability. If you withdraw your support, I will find my own way. I'll work extra shifts, take out loans, whatever it takes. Rosalind's expression shifted from shock to sorrow.
She sank onto the chair.
I only wanted the best for you. Elara knelt beside her mother's chair, voice gentler. I know, Mom. But stability without love is its own kind of prison. A heavy silence fell between them. Rosalind looked at the tulips, then back to Elara's determined face. After a long moment, she exhaled. Then you will chart your own course, she said quietly. But know this, it won't be easy. Elara reached for Rosalind's hand. I don't expect easy, only honest. In that fragile truce, mother and daughter confronted the rigid expectations of heritage and the uncharted terrain of self-determination. The tulips quivered on the table, their pristine petals a reminder that even traditions born of lofty ideals could bend in the face of true conviction. And as Elara left the dining room, the early morning light spilling behind her, she felt both the burden of reality and the exhilaration of forging a future defined by love, rather than concession. The wedding ceremony had taken place on a sunlit Saturday in early May at St. Aurelia's, the little chapel perched atop Maple Ridge's rolling hill. White blossoms from flowering dogwood trees carpeted the lawn as friends and family gathered on wrought iron benches. Elara stood at the altar in a simple ivory gown, sleek lines that mirrored her pragmatic sensibility, while Julian Blackwood waited, looking every bit the picture of pedigree and propriety. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows, blurting tears, and gentle applause. The reception followed at the Maple Ridge Country Club, a stately red-brick manor with sweeping views of the Sandium River Valley. Crystal chandeliers caught the fading light, casting prismatic patterns against the high-ceilinged ballroom. Julian's family had spared no expense. Orchid centerpieces floated above mirrored tablets, and a 5-tiered cake, their family's signature design, displayed a cascade of sugar petals in amber blush hues. Toasts praised Elara's dedication as a nurse, her devotion to community, and Julian's steadfast leadership at the academy. All around, guests beamed, raising flutes of the finest Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. Elara smiled dutifully through it all, yet inside, her heart had grown heavy. She caught her reflection in gleaming silver platters. The same hazel eyes that once sparkled with Dorian's laughter now looked glassy. She had married Julian to spare her mother's hopes and their family's legacy, but the cost weighed on her soul. At last, the reception drew to a polite close. As the last guests filtered out, Elara and Julian slipped away through French doors onto the wraparound terrace. Lanterns strung overhead below a tangle of wisteria vines, and the night air felt cool against her skin. Julian draped his arm around her waist, guiding her toward the waiting stretch limousine. Inside the limousine, he leaned close. You are radiant tonight, he murmured, his hand sweeping lightly along her back. Thank you for making this so perfect. Elara managed a small smile. Thank you for having me, she said softly. He kissed her cheek, lips awkward and practiced, lacking the warmth she once felt with Dorian. The limo hummed away from the country club and wound down Evergreen Street toward the Blackwood estate. The mansion loomed silent under inky skies, its windows dark save for the light in a ground-floor suite prepared for the newlyweds. They climbed the wide marble steps and entered through double oak doors into a foyer that smelled faintly of polished mahogany. A discreet butler, Mr. Hawthorne, appeared quietly, bowing. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood. Your suite awaits. He turned and led them down a carpeted corridor. Candles flickered softly in wall sconces, guiding them to a pair of carved oak doors. Inside, the bridal suite was arranged with meticulous elegance. A 4-poster bed draped in ivory silk, a chaise lounge piled with satin pillows, and near a fireplace, a silver tray with crystal flutes and chilled champagne. White rose petals were strewn across the bedspread in a heart shape. Soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers. Elara's throat tightened as she took it all in. Julian closed the door and switched on a chandelier's low glow. He moved to the tray and poured 2 glasses of champagne. "To us," he said, handing her a flute. "To us," Elara echoed, her voice brittle. They sipped quietly. The heat of drink washed a momentary ease through her. Julian set his glass aside. He reached for Elara's hand, guiding her to the chaise. "I want this night to be special," he murmured. His touch was tentative, almost unsure. "You are mine now." Elara nodded, heart constricting. She wrapped her fingers around his. "I wanted to be special, too." She summoned a gentle smile. He moved to unhook the back of her dress. Elara's skin prickled. Something in his manner had shifted. The courteous husband fell away, revealing a rigid determination. Too suddenly, his hands pressed against her shoulders, and his lips met hers with more force than tenderness. Elara froze, startled by the abruptness. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice rough. She nodded, swallowing. "Yes." He stepped back. "Good." He ran his fingers down her spine. "I've been waiting all night." He began to undress her, but his hands fumbled. When he finally stepped behind her and drew the gown off her shoulders, he paused to admire her. Yet the look in his eyes was not awe but expectation. Elara felt a swell of panic. Julian's hands moved to undo his own shirt. The torn buttons fell to the floor. He shed the fabric, revealing broad shoulders and a chest touched by moonlight through the window. Elara moved closer, touching his arm. "Julian." He turned to her, expression curt. "Not yet," he said. His eyes darted away. "I want everything to be perfect." Before she could respond, he lifted her in an awkward embrace and carried her to the bed. He set her down gently, then knelt, untying her bodice. Elara's pulse raced. She wanted this moment to symbolize love and union, but instead, it felt like crossing an unseen threshold into obligation. When her dress pooled at her feet, Julian's face hardened. He stared at her chest, then leaned in and kissed her collarbone. His breath grew ragged, and his kisses turned restless. Elara's skin felt fire-hot under his lips, yet she felt nothing but a cold void in her chest. Suddenly, Julian's demeanor shifted again. He pressed himself against her. Elara gasped, trying to push away. "Julian, please." His voice cut through the flickering candlelight. "Stop resisting." He sounded more like a commander than a partner. "We're married. This is our wedding night." Elara recoiled. "I'm not resisting," she said, voice tight. I just... He silenced her with a sharp hand across her cheek, and the slap echoed in the chamber like a shattering glass. Elara's vision blurred, tears springing to her eyes. "You belong to me now," Julian hissed, voice low and unforgiving. "I own you." A cold rage and a deeper fear surged through Elara. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shield the humiliation. Julian advanced, voice hard as iron. "You're going to learn your place." He grabbed her wrists, pinning them above her head. Panic flooded her chest. "No," she choked out, despair rising in her throat. "Please stop." He ignored her, his face void of remorse. Each movement became harsher, less measured. Elara's body trembled as he forced himself upon her. Pain and shame collided as she cried out. The soft waltz music that had once felt romantic now felt like a cruel soundtrack to her nightmare. Julian's breaths came raggedly, but his voice remained a disciplined whisper. "You'll thank me for this one day," he muttered, eyes distant. "You'll learn loyalty." Her tears fell hot and angry. "You're hurting me," she gasped, voice broken. He paused, his body stilling for a moment. A flicker of something, guilt? Doubt? Crossed his eyes before he snapped. "Don't be dramatic." His hand tightened. Elara fought to push him off, but his strength outmatched her. She curled into herself, willing the ordeal to end, her mind retreating into numbed disbelief. Finally, it ended. Julian collapsed onto his side, breathing heavily, as though he had accomplished a duty rather than committed an atrocity. Elara lay limp on the mattress, eyes wide with shock and pain. Her gown was torn, her skin bruised. The palace of silk and candlelight had become a cage of suffering. Julian rolled away and reached for his shirt. "Get dressed," he said flatly, voice devoid of warmth. He turned away, staring at the wall as though she were invisible. Elara remained still, tears streaking her cheeks, staring at the darkened ceiling. A single candle guttered as a breeze swept through the open window. Outside, the night seemed innocuous. Crickets chirped, and distant car lights traced through the valley. But she lay trapped in that suite, battered and betrayed, in a marriage she had never truly chosen. When dawn's first blush crept through the curtains, Elara crept from the bed, dress torn but still wearable. She passed Julian, still asleep on the chaise, his face slack in oblivion. She gathered her torn bodice and crept out of the suite, leaving behind the shattered illusions of a perfect wedding night. Downstairs in the foyer, she paused, listening for sounds of people, any comfort in a familiar voice. The house was silent. She slipped on her coat, hair matted, and opened the front door. She stepped into the gray dawn air, her legs unsteady. Outside, she paused, pressing her hand to her stomach, as though gathering the strength to breathe. With each shaky breath, she vowed this fracturing would not define her. She would seek help. She would speak out. She would find herself again. And as the sun broke free from the horizon, painting Maple Ridge in rosy light, Elara Hayes resolved that this marriage would not be her story. She would reclaim her life, one step at a time. Elara left the Blackwood estate before sunrise, the torn hem of her wedding gown tucked beneath her coat. She drove in silence through the sleeping streets of Maple Ridge, headlights cutting low swaths of light through drifting mist. At home, she collapsed into a chair at the kitchen island, heart pounding not just from the trauma of her wedding night, but from a sudden, unsettling nausea that had begun hours earlier. Her reflection in the coffee-stained toaster window looked fragile, pale skin, dark circles, haunted eyes. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, white test kit she'd bought on impulse that morning. Her hands trembled as she peeled back the wrapper, heart tightening around a single, fervent question. Could this be real? Moments later, the two pink lines solidified on the strip, bold and unmistakable. Elara gasped, breath rushing as though she'd plunged beneath icy water. She pressed a hand to her mouth, back of her fingers damp with tears. Then, in the quiet solitude of that kitchen, hope unfurled in her chest for the first time since Dorian's betrayal and Julian's violence. She sank onto the stool, clutching the test like a fragile treasure, tears spilling freely now, not from sorrow, but from relief. A child, a new life, something pure and untainted. A chance to heal her fractured heart and forge a future separate from both men who had hurt her. Over the next days, Elara tiptoed around her small apartment with a secret glow. She skipped coffee in the mornings, replaced by ginger tea, and bought soft maternity leggings in sage green. She researched prenatal vitamins and downloaded a pregnancy tracker app, pressing thumbs into the tiny pixels that marked exactly 5 weeks, baby the size of a sesame seed. Each new symptom, twinges of fatigue, faint cravings for oranges, a flutter of nausea, felt like affirmations from within. She even drafted a message to her mother, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Mom, I have news."
I'm pregnant.
She balked at sending it, afraid of her mother's reaction, fearful that the revelation might draw attention she wasn't ready for. Instead, she poured her hopes into a little blue journal. Each entry a vow: I will protect you. I will love you. I will keep you safe. As the 6th week approached, she felt a surge of confidence. She scheduled an early appointment at the Maple Ridge Women's Center, choosing the same clinic where she had encountered Julian's betrayal. This time, she hoped for a refuge, a place of science and care, far removed from pain. When she arrived, the waiting room's pastel walls and soft-spoken receptionist offered comfort. Minutes later, a gentle nurse led her back for an ultrasound. Elara lay on the examination table, the cool gel on her abdomen oddly soothing. In the darkened room, the sonogram monitor flickered to life. The technician's voice was calm. "Let me know if you need a moment." Elara nodded, gaze fixed on the glowing screen. Then she saw it, a tiny flicker of life, a heartbeat pulsing no larger than a pinprick. She held her breath as the technician pointed to the motion. "There it is," the technician said softly. "About 6 weeks along." Tears of joy blurred Elara's vision. The gentle thump-thump-thump felt like a promise, a tether to a future unbroken by Julian's violence or Dorian's departure. She left the clinic clutching the ultrasound image to her chest, the world around her ablaze with possibility. For the next 2 weeks, Elara floated on a hopeful current. She made tentative plans. Repaint the spare bedroom in soft mint, research childbirth classes, envision a small gathering of friends, Dorian among them, if he would ever deserve such an honor. The secret life growing inside her felt like a sacred flame she could not allow to be snuffed out. But then, at 8 weeks, the unthinkable happened. She felt a sharp, sudden cramp while reaching for a glass on the kitchen counter. It felt like a knife twisting in her lower abdomen. She staggered to the bathroom, gripping the sink's porcelain edge. A trickle of blood stained her pajama top and the cool tile beneath her feet. Panic erupted in her chest. She called the clinic, and they advised immediate return. Half-dressed and terrified, Elara drove through drizzling rain, hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like judgment, every passing car a witness to her crisis. At the Women's Center, she was escorted to an emergency exam room. The sonographer returned, her gentle eyes brimming with empathy. Elara closed her eyes as the gel touched her skin once more. The screen remained dark. No flicker of life, no heartbeat. The crimson stain on the sheet beneath her confirmed the worst. The technician offered a tissue. Elara pressed it to her lips, knuckles white as she clenched her journal. "I'm so sorry, honey," the technician murmured, not for her benefit but for the child whose existence had already left such an indelible mark. Elara lay back, the weight of loss crashing over her like the river in winter. She thought of Dorian's betrayal, of Julian's violence, of the cruelty life had visited upon her at every turn. And she thought of that tiny heartbeat, gone before it even had the chance to grow. Tears fell in silent tracks down her cheeks as the grief welled, raw and profound. She felt hollow, as though someone had carved out the space where her hope had lived. The room swayed, and she clutched the paper gown to her chest, weeping for the life that might have been. In the days that followed, Elara drifted through her routines like a ghost. Her journal remained unopened, the ultrasound image tucked away in her wallet. She returned to the hospital for her shifts, donning scrubs and a professional mask. She cared for patients with injuries and illnesses, offering calm reassurances even as her own world felt undone. Rosalind arrived one evening at the hospital, having heard of her daughter's emergency. She found Elara in the break room, head in her hands. Without a word, she sat beside her and wrapped her arms around her trembling shoulders. Elara finally wept openly, the grief no longer containable. Rosalind held her like a scared child, begging silent forgiveness for every pressure she had applied, for every expectation that had led Elara to believe her life must be flawless. In that embrace, mother and daughter shared a grief that transcended family discord. The prospect of new life had ignited hope, only to be extinguished in tragedy. And yet, as they clung to each other, Elara sensed a quiet shift, a fragile resilience. The future remained unwritten, but for the first time, it felt truly hers to reclaim, free from the weight of these intertwined losses. And though her heart ached beyond measure, Elara knew that she would rise again, gently, surely, because in the ruins of heartbreak, hope could still take root. The morning after Elara's miscarriage, the Hayes kitchen was thick with remorse. Rosalind poured 2 cups of chamomile tea, her mother's healing ritual, and placed one before her daughter, without a word. Elara sat at the table, head bowed, still wearing the hospital gown beneath her robe. Rosalind joined her, folding her hands around the steaming mug. "Elara," Rosalind said gently, voice heavy with regret, "I have failed you." Her eyes glistened. "I pushed you into Julian's arms thinking I was protecting you. Instead, I've betrayed you." Elara looked up, surprise mingling with sorrow. "Mom, it's not all your fault," she whispered. "I made choices too." Rosalind shook her head firmly. "Not this time. I drove you into a marriage that harmed you. I can't undo the past, but I can help you reclaim your future." Over the next days, Rosalind set into motion a plan of atonement. She began by gathering concrete evidence of Julian's cruelty. She retrieved Elara's bruised medical records, documented by Maple Ridge General's ER after the wedding night assault, and had them certified by Dr. Patel, the hospital's chief surgeon. She collected photos of Elara's injuries, time-stamped and catalogued, alongside the Women's Center's notes on the miscarriage procedure. Next, she tapped old contacts in the Academy's administrative office to confirm Julian's pattern of misconduct, unreported student complaints of inappropriate behavior, and his late-night meetings with a call. Whose identity remained murky. Rosalind placed discreet calls, reminding the Board of Trustees of their duty to protect students and uphold the institution's integrity. Meanwhile, Elara met with attorney Marisol Vega, whose office smelled of leather-bound case files and fresh jasmine from the vases in her reception area. Marisol had earned a reputation in Portland for championing women's rights in family courts. She reviewed the evidence, medical reports, photographs, sworn statements from Elara's hospital colleagues who had witnessed her distress in the days after the wedding. She nodded gravely. "You have a solid case for both assault and abandonment," Marisol said. "We'll file for divorce on grounds of cruelty and irreconcilable differences. And we'll seek full custody of any future children and spousal support based on Julian's income." Elara exhaled, the first breath of empowerment she'd felt in months. "I just want to be free," she said. "Freedom is exactly what we're going to secure," Marisol affirmed. At home, Rosalind drafted the divorce petition, her hand steady despite the emotional weight. She typed Elara's narrative of the wedding night, supported by the evidence she had meticulously collected. She wrote Julian a certified letter. "Your abusive conduct has irreparably harmed our daughter. Please find enclosed the petition for divorce and notice of intent to pursue legal redress." Within a week, the papers were served. Julian's initial reaction was fury. He stormed into the Hayes cottage the evening the sheriff delivered the documents, cuffing them in his palm like a gauntlet. Elara, resolute, stood beside her mother as Julian ranted about betrayal and slander. But Rosalind's icy calm deflected his aggression. "You made your bed," Rosalind said softly. "Now you must lie in it." Julian snarled, but he could no longer deny the mounting evidence. The next day, Elara and Rosalind submitted the final exhibits to the court. Medical affidavits, professional assessments, and character statements from Elara's colleagues and friends. Word of the lawsuit rippled through Maple Ridge. The Academy's trustees convened an emergency meeting after a flurry of parent complaints. Julian, confronted with a tarnished reputation, was compelled to resign. The local paper's headline read, "PE coach exits amid abuse allegations. His once esteemed name now a cautionary tale." On the morning of the divorce hearing, Elara entered the courtroom in a tailored gray suit, hair pulled back, expression composed. Rosalind slipped in beside her, proud tears glimmering in her eyes. Julian arrived alone, hollow-faced, and took a seat at the defendant's table. The judge reviewed the voluminous case file before him. Elara's attorney presented the evidence in clear, deliberate fashion, photographs of bruises, doctors' testimonies describing injuries consistent with non-consensual force, the PTSD assessment from a licensed therapist, and a detailed record of the miscarriage attributed to trauma. Each exhibit underscored the severity of Julian's conduct. When Julian's defense attorney attempted to downplay the injuries as accidental and the miscarriage as unrelated, Marisol Vega's cross-examination exposed inconsistencies. Julian's colleague, summoned reluctantly as a character witness, recounted rumors of Julian's harsh treatment of female students, rumors Julian had ignored until court subpoenaed his shirt with tear stains. By noon, the judge's gavel fell. Based on the evidence, I grant the petition for divorce on grounds of cruelty. The marriage is dissolved effective immediately. He paused, then added, I also grant a protective order prohibiting Mr. Blackwood from contacting Ms. Hayes. Any violation will result in criminal contempt. Elara released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Across the courtroom, Julian's jaw clenched as his world unraveled. He gathered his notes and slipped out without meeting her eye. Outside the courthouse, Elara and Rosalind stood on the steps, bright sunshine gilding the pillars behind them. Reporters hovered, but Marisol guided Elara through a quiet side exit. Once they were alone, mother and daughter embraced tightly, relief and triumph mingling in their embrace. Rosalind's voice trembled with emotion. I'm so proud of you, she whispered. You stood up for yourself when no one else would. Elara closed her eyes, pressing her cheek to her mother's. I couldn't have done it without you. Together, they walked through the town square, past the bronze statue of the founder, past the gazebo where Dorian had once promised forever, past the academy's gates now empty of Julian's mantle. As they strolled, Maple Ridge's early evening bustle stirred around them, bell chimes from the clock tower, children's laughter drifting from the playground, the scent of freshly baked bread wafting from the corner bakery. In that moment, Elara Hayes felt the weight of her mother's redemption and her own liberation. The past could not be rewritten, but the future stretched before her, unshackled, uncertain, and entirely her own to shape. Together, mother and daughter stepped forward into the golden glow of possibility, leaving behind the wreckage of forced vows and broken promises. The morning sun rose over Maple Ridge with a soft promise. Elara Hayes woke in her own cottage, the familiar scent of lavender from her new garden wafting in through the open window. She no longer slept in her mother's home, nor did she carry the echo of Julian's cruelty in each breath. Instead, she'd moved into a small renovated loft above the town's bookshop, a space she'd chosen herself, with sunlit windows and walls she could paint any color. Today, the walls were a gentle sage, a nod to new growth. She stretched and reached for her journal, the same little blue book where she once tucked her most fragile hopes. Now, its pages held resolutions and plans. Enroll in the nurse practitioner program at Portland Community College, volunteer at the local women's shelter, and, tentatively, explore the possibility of love again. Elara ran her fingers over her notes, feeling gratitude for the woman she had become, resilient, compassionate, and wholly her own. Downstairs, the bookshop's bell chimed as the owner, Marcus Bennett, unlocked the front door for the day. Elara descended the narrow staircase, trading a quiet greeting with Marcus before slipping into her nurse's uniform. She had chosen to work part-time at Maple Ridge General to maintain her roots in patient care while pursuing advanced studies. Her morning shift began with the usual rounds, checking on Mrs. Donovan after her knee surgery, adjusting Mr. Whitaker's foredrip, and offering a reassuring touch to a young accident victim. Each task grounded her in purpose. She was no longer defined by broken promises or lost futures. She was defined by the healing she extended to others. During her lunch break, Elara slipped out to the town square, where the bronze statue of Maple Ridge's founder stood sentinel. She crossed the cobblestones to the gazebo, where Dorian had once called her name in hope and loss, and paused at the wrought iron railing. The fountain's gentle trickle echoed the resilience of the human heart, ever flowing despite obstacles. Elara closed her eyes and drew a deep breath. I'm ready, she whispered to the breeze, though she wasn't yet certain of what lay ahead. That afternoon, an email arrived in her inbox. Subject: Invitation Cascade Engineering Alumni Event. Her pulse quickened. Dorian Wells, now a senior project manager, was scheduled to speak about sustainable infrastructure in growing towns. The event would take place that Saturday at the Maple Ridge Community Center. Elara stared at the invitation, heart fluttering between excitement and trepidation. She had not seen Dorian since the betrayal, but his presence had always felt like a missing chord in her life's melody. Could she confront the possibilities of forgiveness and renewal? Could she embrace vulnerability once more? She deleted the email, then immediately reopened it. She typed a brief RSVP. "Thank you for the invitation. I will attend." Her finger hovered over send. In that moment, she chose hope. The weekend arrived with brisk spring air and a sky washed in cerulean. Elara chose a soft blue dress, one that hinted at confidence without arrogance, and pinned a single white daisy in her hair, a symbol of innocence regained. She practiced a steady breath before entering the community center's multipurpose hall, where colleagues and townspeople milled around poster boards and hors d'oeuvres tables. As she approached the registration desk, a familiar voice called out, "Elara?" She turned to see Dorian Wells, slender and composed in a navy blazer and khaki trousers. A cocktail in his hand, he offered her a tentative smile. His hair was streaked with early grays at the temples, and his eyes bore the trace of maturity gained through hardship. "Dorian," she said, heart lifting and trembling simultaneously. "Thank you for inviting me." He nodded, extending a hand. "Would you like a drink?" Elara accepted a sparkling water. They navigated through ceremonial displays of green bridge models and drone footage of stormproof dams, eventually finding an empty corner where they could talk quietly. He cleared his throat. "I'm glad you came." His voice held the same warmth, but now tempered by apology. "I've wanted to see you since everything happened." She looked away for a moment, gathering composure beneath the bright overhead lights. "I wasn't sure I could," she admitted. "But I realized that holding on to pain keeps you from moving forward." Dorian nodded, eyes earnest. "I'm so sorry, Elara, for how I left you, for missing what was right in front of me. You deserved better." Elara studied his face, searching for authenticity. She saw regret, yes, but also a renewed sense of purpose. "I know," she said quietly, "and I forgive you." A cautious smile broke on his lips. "Thank you. I never stopped caring about you." They spoke for a long moment in comfortable silence, punctuated only by distant laughter from the hall's main floor. Then Dorian shifted, clearing his throat. I'd like another chance. Only if you're open to it." Elara weighed her words, every lesson she'd learned in the intervening months rising to guide her. "I'm open," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "But I need time. My life is busy, school, work, volunteer projects," she smiled. "And I have a newfound sense of what I want." Dorian's eyes shone. "Whatever pace you choose, I'm here." In that moment, Maple Ridge's community room, lined with bright posters on flood-resistant roadways, felt like sacred ground. Two people, once sundered by hurt and circumstance, now stood together under the same promise of renewal. The keynote speech began, but Elara and Dorian lingered a while longer, reminiscing about their early hikes along the Santiam River and laughing at memories of midnight coffee in emergency room lounges. The warmth between them was tentative, but real, like the first green shoots of spring pushing through thawed earth. That evening, as she walked home along Evergreen Street, Elara paused beneath the same maple tree where Julian had once recited vows she could not feel. Now, in the hush of twilight, its leaves whispered above her, "You are free." At home, she changed into comfortable clothes and poured herself a cup of tea. She opened her journal to a fresh page and wrote in flowing script. "Today I forgave. Today I open my heart. My future is no longer defined by fear or obligation, only by my own choices. I trust that, step by step, life will reveal its next chapter." She closed the journal, picking up the ultrasound photo she'd tucked into the back cover, a tiny, flickering heartbeat she would always carry in her soul. And with that gentle remembrance, Elara Hayes embraced the promise of tomorrow, her spirit renewed, her path her own to forge. Outside, Maple Ridge settled beneath a canopy of stars, each one a whisper of possibility. And in the quiet glow of her loft window, Elara felt the steady drum of a heart no longer broken, but whole and ready to love again. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.